Hey everybody, welcome back to Arbitrary 20. Today we're going to be talking about Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. I'd like to start off with just our first impressions of the movie.
Man, it was good. Honestly, it was pretty decent for a D&D movie. If anybody's watched the old one, the old D&D movie, it's amazing. It's a good watch if you want to just laugh. But I think they really did a good job with it. There are some things that, everybody's got their dislikes, but probably a 7.5 for me on a scale of 10.
What's the old movie you're referring to?
Oh, God, I can't even remember the name. It was a Dungeons & Dragons movie. Literally, Dungeons & Dragons.
Yeah, it's just called Dungeons & Dragons?
Cool. Yeah, so there are, a lot of people don't know this, maybe the new 5th edition people. There are other Dungeons & Dragons movies made by Wizards of the Coast, or even TSR, back when that was a thing. And I have not seen any of them. I of course have friends who have besides Ethan, and I've been told they are mediocre at best, but I honestly can't really compare. I will say I'm a big fantasy nerd, and I would say I think a good 7, but with what on a scale with actual 1s and 2s, it's above average. Not amazing, not groundbreaking. It's not, Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings. But I would say it's better than, personally, it was better than The Witcher. It was better, than it was better than The Wheel of Time, in my personal opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, that Dungeons & Dragons, it's literally called Dungeons & Dragons on IMDb, and it was made in 2000.
So that would be Wizards. That would be right when Wizards got it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was it was okay. Yeah. It's a good movie. It's like Sharknado. It's just bad funny.
That's fair.
Boy.
I will say, speaking about bad funny, there's some movies on YouTube that I know I've talked about a lot behind the scenes called The Gamers. And they are kind of bad funny D&D, half the movie is in real life and half the movie is what's happening in game. And so it'll cut between them rolling and then what happens in game. And as much as I did enjoy this movie, and it was funny, Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez had some really funny chemistry between the two. I think that the other actors were also very, very good. There were some great jokes in there. It didn't capture, as someone who prefers Dungeons & Dragons above and in game, out of game and in game, that was a little bit kind of less fun for me.
Well, I mean, they did have to make it for people who were just getting into Dungeons & Dragons or didn't even know what the game was at all. I've heard about it in the 80s. If you take anything like that, a card game, a role-playing game, anything like that, TTRPG, you're going to have you're going to have a little bit of both bad and good.
That's fair.
I don't think there's any in between with that.
Yeah.
The fights are always the most fun to think about. Combat scenarios when we play at the table. Just because in actuality, they last 6 seconds. Your turn lasts 6 seconds. And watching a combat, and I think, the Critical Role's, Vox Machina animated series did combat really well. And they extended it. They extended the time it takes and stuff. And I think that's really hard to get into a movie if you don't really know what the hell is happening, at the table. But combat scenes were great. I didn't like the ending. Spoilers. The end of the movie didn't really cut it for me. The battle at the end felt kind of forced. Didn't really give me that big bad kind of vibe that most Dungeons and Dragons players kind of look forward to. I want to be shitting myself in combat. That's the fun part in a game. Mm-hmm. And the magic stuff was cool, and the fireballs and the call meteors, that was awesome. But I think it went fairly quickly and didn't give us a sense of urgency.
I will say, I agree with you to a large extent. Just talking about that one scene, which is not, I have a rather large problem with the movie, but we'll get to that later. In that scene, the tough part was it definitely felt like they were trying to be an Avengers movie. Like,
oh my God.
Like there's this scene where the druid character turns into an owlbear and just like, you know, literally the scene from Avengers from 2012 where the Hulk smashes Loki. It is that scene.
Yep.
I almost thought that they directly used the mocap for a second. They didn't. It was different. But the intent was, it was very much like
it was unoriginal.
It went past the point of and into derivative. Like there's a line there and they crossed it.
I mean, well, if you think about it, like, pretty much any work for the most part is inspired at the very least by something else. Like I forget, I was watching a video at one point and they were breaking down how there was multiple scenes in several separate different movies that were part of different franchises that were near identical in their scenes. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and like I say, there's a line where, and you know, for other people it might not have crossed that line, but for me it did. There's the line between funny and a nod and inspired by and derivative of. You know, if in that movie there was a sword that had been broken that gets reforged, you know, it's like, oh, that's Lord of the Rings. You know, oh, that's just totally derivative. Even though this whole movie might as well have been based on Lord of the Rings, you know, I mean, it's Tolkien inspired so much of modern fantasy. Like there's a line somewhere. And personally, I think that towards the end of the movie, especially that one scene that, again, you know, big dude takes the main villain and just throws him around. It's kind of played off for laughs. You know, it kind of ends that
almost
villain.
Felt too easy.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I will say squishy wizard, so, you know, but
you know, yeah, you bring up a great point. Squishy wizard. You're right.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
So that was kind of my biggest problem with it.
The pacing was great. I think the pacing was fantastic. I think like going from scene to scene, going from town to town, like even in like while we play at the table, like traveling days suck. That's my personal opinion. Like having to roll 8 checks for 8 days and just like just going through the motions, I think it sucks for me. But like where they was like, they're in this town, you know? And I'm glad they didn't do the thing like the red dot in Indiana Jones, although I would have loved to see it. That would have been great if they just threw the map up there and just drew a line where they were going and where they went.
At the beginning.
Did they really?
At the very beginning.
Karen.
Mm-hmm. They showed it was Icewind Dale, and I don't know enough about Faerun, but they did show it a little bit.
I wasn't paying attention for that part, I'll be honest.
It's okay.
Right.
You were also dressed in a big Sasquatch costume. You were probably pretty uncomfortable.
Dude, I was so warm. It was the greatest decision I ever made. No, I think the pacing was great, and having them jump from town to town quickly was good, and understanding that, it took a little bit of time. Yeah. They had to get horses and all that good stuff, but...
Yeah, that was definitely a major plus. The pacing was excellent. Action scenes, the characters. It was a very funny movie. It's a lot easier to talk about stuff we didn't like, but legitimately, it was very funny. I would say, I was explaining this actually, funnily enough, to my parents, who are totally not D&D people. I was like, yeah, you could watch this knowing nothing about D&D and think it's funny and have a good time and go from there. My biggest issue with the movie actually has nothing to do with the movie. It's the marketing. My problem with the marketing. They play the same flippin' jokes in every single trailer. In every trailer, there's at least all of the ones that I saw, and I saw a lot of them, was the scene where Hugh Grant goes to Chris Pine and says, "I don't want to watch you die, so now I'm going to leave the room." And that is a funny joke, especially with the context of the movie behind it. You have the history between these two characters. You get this reveal that this guy's a bad guy. and it spoiled that reveal. That reveal is pretty early in the movie, let's be real. But it spoils that reveal. It spoils the line, and it was so overplayed that it was no longer funny. That joke legitimately should be funny. And it was so overdone in the marketing. They played it directly. We did see an advanced screening, and they played it directly before the movie in like the making of section or whatever it was. And they played it in most of the trailers. And that was a genuine disservice because that is one of the best jokes.
I think all ads at this point in time, like I remember watching 2008, 2009, like Shrek, right? And they played a couple of scenes from Shrek, but none of them were like revealing to what was happening. They were funny, but not like overly funny. And it didn't ruin the movie. I think nowadays when marketing firms or whatever, I don't fucking know how they do it. I'm not privy to that information, but the way they do it now is they basically just show you the whole movie in the ad.
Well, that's why I try to avoid the trailers as much as possible. As soon as I saw that one scene where they were in the graveyard and they were going around and speaking with dead or whatever they were doing,
which he cast like 5 times, by the way, and that's impossible.
No, it's possible.
He had like a token or something, but the point is that I saw that scene and I was like, okay, well, like that's like a standard D&D trope where you talk to the dead person and you ask the questions and like it's the cheese that happens between the DM and the player, and at that point I was like, I'm not watching any more trailers because I knew they were going to spoil the rest of the movie for me.
Yeah, and as someone who is really skeptical, I watched a lot of the trailers, and that was tough because the trailers did make me want to see the movie, but they also ruined the cemetery scene, which is hilarious.
It's fucking funny.
At least the first part of it. There's more that happens after that trailer ends that is also really funny. But
can you ask me one more question?
Yeah, like that was great.
That was good.
And there is a post-credit scene, and it's also very funny. It just like, I understand that they need to put in some of the funny jokes so that people will go see the movie and know that it's a comedy. But at the same time, like, you got to keep it in such a way to where, it's still funny after watching the trailer. And I think that playing the funny scenes from the movie, especially right before it starts, was just...
It was a bit much. Here's what I'll say.
Less great decision than it should have been.
Watch the ads. Watch the trailer, right? For any movie. Watch 20 seconds of the trailer. If it makes you laugh, if it makes you shit yourself, if it tenses you up, anything that you, like, if the movie is a horror movie and it makes you scared in the first 20 seconds, don't watch the rest of the trailer, shut it off, wait till the movie comes out, go see it in theaters or at home
that's
or
fair.
whatever. If you don't want to ruin movies for yourself in this day and age, you can't watch the trailers anymore.
Yeah.
It ruins the entire movie.
That's fair.
Do you guys think that the reason why they may have pushed the marketing more aggressively in that sense of showing the quotes from the movie simply based on like things like the OGL and all that other things?
No. I think that if you look at modern fantasy, the names that pop into your head, I'm not like shows and movies, not books, because books is a whole different thing. You get George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, grimdark. You get The Witcher, grimdark. You get Lord of the Rings, high fantasy, very serious, all 3. Okay, and there's more. There's a lot more in YA, young adult fantasy that I'm not, Skull and Bones and things like that I'm not as big into. But these are all dark, serious things. That is what modern fantasy is grimdark, is what that's called. You get actively punished for doing good things, generally. This is not that. This is, I guess, high fantasy, but it's a comedy. But it's not Monty Python. There's a line in there. And I think that they were pushing it so hard to show this is fantasy. This is maybe even epic fantasy or high fantasy. This is a comedy. And so they pushed it so hard to show non-D&D people.
I think you have to
it's
take.
funny.
I think you have to take that into consideration. Both of us have to take that into consideration when we're criticizing it because, yeah, we play Dungeons and Dragons constantly.
Yeah.
And we love it. Don't get me wrong. Never get bored. I love this shit. But we're in it.
Yeah, we were going to see the movie whether we wanted to or not.
Exactly.
Pretty much, you know. As soon as they announced it, we were like, we're going as a group, right? Like, that was immediate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just like, it is hard for non-D&D players or people who, like, I showed the trailer to my mom and she was like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
It's like, this is what we play this, Mom. I'm a nerd. Look at this. It's so cool. Look at all the spells and stuff. She's like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Like,
But on the flip side, my parents, who know I play D&D, but, are a little bit more of the type, were like, is it good? And I was like, it's funny. And they were like, okay, we're down to go see a funny movie.
Yeah.
But we're not invested enough to go see The Lord of the Rings Part 2. I mean, they go see The Lord of the Rings Part 2, but not, some different universe that's just trying to be Lord of the Rings. So
now, spoiler, they did reveal that the Red Wizards or whatever, there was like the main bad guy with the horn.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a sequel.
But like they revealed kind of the big bad for the next one, and I think that's why they kind of took a shit on the ending, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, they're going to try and make a franchise out of this.
I hope they don't get it wrong. I hope they do good and they do it right. And if they don't, well, I just won't watch it.
I mean, sequels are typically where series go to die.
The
first ones are always great, and the second ones, so
there are some series where that's not the case.
come on, Transformers.
Generally
2.
speaking, but yeah,
I like Transformers too.
Everybody loves Transformers 2. It's
Yeah,
still got Shia LaBeouf in it. Like it's
too
still
terrified to watch it. The first one was so good that I just don't want to watch the rest of them. Either way, I guess just to wrap this up here, would you guys go and watch it again?
Oh, for sure. I use that movie as like a funny, hey, let's get some popcorn and watch a movie kind of night. I wouldn't go back to the theater and watch it because I'm not paying $20 to go and watch it in theaters.
That's a good way to put it.
I'd pay $1 when it came out on DVD. DVDs still exist.
I will say,
Redbox or whatever.
Redbox it.
It didn't hit as hard for me as the gamers with, I think I mentioned earlier, it's this like terrible YouTube movie student film type thing. I thought that was better. It more encapsulated what I enjoy about D&D. But if we were just like, let's watch a funny fantasy movie, there you go. That's a perfect one.
Last thing I'll say is the difference between this movie and something like Vox Machina, the animated series, is Vox Machina really tried to, they didn't always do it, but they tried to stick with core functions and rules of D&D, which I absolutely love, because it's fun to sit in a theater or at your house and be like, I know what that spell is. Yeah. I know what they're doing there. Yeah. I know they fucking rolled a nat 1 trying to jump over that gorge, or something to that effect. Mm-hmm. In this movie, I think I said it to one of you while we were walking out, of like the druid shape changing 8 times in a day.
The bard never using bardic inspiration.
The bard never using... Well, we had a discussion about that one where it was like the bard not using magic, but also he's like the glue that keeps everybody together and like inspires people with his words and stuff like that. So there was like some give and take there.
I don't think he was actually a bard. I think he was a fighter who just used an improvised weapon of a lute the entire time, or reflavored it as a club.
That's a very good observation. I didn't think about that. But yeah, they didn't really stick to the core functions or rules very much, which
they name dropped some stuff though.
Yeah. Hey, you gotta go for the right audience, and they were trying to broaden their spectrum of an audience of like, we want non-D&D players to come and, watch this, and we want D&D players to come and watch it too. So they kind of mixed and matched, but yeah, I'd give total 7.5 for the film.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, I think that's where we'll end it here. So thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to check out some of our other videos on our channel that YouTube thinks you might like, you can click here. Until then, we'll see you next time.